Hi, my name is Pierre Leichner, living in North Vancouver, Canada. First, I want to acknowledge the privilege I have of living on beautiful Squamish Nation territory, unceded territory. It's important to note for me that I believe that Indigenous nations had much more respect and understanding of food and food production than settlers that came to this continent. My talk today is about art as a means to address food politics and production concerns, which is something that I have been working on for a number of years now. So first I'm going to tell you a bit about myself, and then I will show you some of the work I've been engaged in over the past decade or so regarding these issues. My parents were Hungarians who fled to France, and that's where I grew up. So it's not perhaps a surprise that I developed a fairly strong interest in food and cooking from early on. After coming to Canada, I first studied neurobiochemistry, interested in the mind and consciousness from a brain biological viewpoint. This took me towards medicine, and where I became a psychiatrist, again interested in the mind and consciousness. And it's not a surprise that eventually I specialized in eating disorders. So for about 35 years or so, this was my major clinical focus. However, I became somewhat disillusioned with the way medicine was going in terms of management, in terms of bureaucratization and corporatization of the system, and was very fortunate to be able to leave it about 20 years ago to go into a career and retrain as an artist. So today, for the last decade or so, I've been a full-time artist. I describe myself as an interdisciplinary artist. There is a focus on environmental art and mental health through the arts, and my research addresses different issues that are important to us. I also work with the community, making work around this. Because I believe in my work being important in terms of sharing knowledge and increasing knowledge, I like to use multisensorial approaches, which means most of my works will involve visual aspects, sound, as well as tactile, if I can, aspects, and finally, of course, taste, which is one of the topics of this conference. One of my first projects was called Food Wars. It was at the time when I found myself interested in the influence of government on food production around the globe. And this work was visual in one aspect of producing a number of photographs using little toy soldiers, which I would include in photographs around the meals. Most of my meals would be ended with a series of shoots, which I then published. As part of this show, I also created a number of sculptures of shrimp tails. I was interested in shrimp tails in particular because I learned that the way we harvest shrimp is very detrimental to the ocean. And I created these illuminated shrimp tails in which I included either little objects referencing pollution of the oceans, as well as toy soldiers as well. So this show was a multimedia show. Next, I worked on perhaps the first series of work that really addressed more directly the issue of colonization and food, was called Pairings. In this installation, as you can see, there were a number of, I used a lot of coffee tables that I found used. It's interesting to know that coffee tables are a relatively new piece of furniture because they did not exist in the Western cultures until, of course, coffee and tea were imported from the colonies. So in this work, what I did is resurface these coffee tables with magnified images of skin of different colors, sometimes skin with scars, sometimes bruises. And on these tables, I also put exotic fruits and foods, so that the viewer was invited to actually taste some of these foods and think, obviously, through what the objects meant in terms of referring to what process that is still going on of how we treat countries that produce some of these foods that we want and buy in the Western world. This here is a video of some of these tables, and also the soundtrack that accompanied the presentation. In 2009, I was studying sculpture, and I became interested in the possibility of using plant to become the actual media for sculptures. I then developed this project that was called Root Laboratory, kind of a scientific approach and a bit of an alchemist approach. And based on some early childhood experience with growing wheatgrass around Christmas time, I started to use wheatgrass and the roots of the wheatgrass to become the actual sculptural objects that I was creating. I used primarily recycling material molds that I found in recycling bins. So in the example here you can see an egg carton, you can see the mold of a plastic toy, a Halloween toy, and also popsicles, in which I used to have the roots take the shape of and then photograph them. I went on to make portraits or bust using wheatgrass by taking the molds of the faces of some of my colleagues and workers, and then creating these faces, which I would then put on display and allow to dry while in the show, so they kind of metamorphosed or became dry and changed color there while on display. Here's some of these photos from some of these roots, and these were actual people. In fact, it was a grassroots workers in the community center, and this project was conducted. And these faces were then put on show within the community center. I met several shows using this idea, and also participated in a number of festivals that were environmental art festivals. This one most recently, and you can see here that I also had small trees, cypress trees, grow in molds. Here you can see one that was actually a monitor, and another one, another couple that were tires. The roots took the shape of tires, and one that where the root actually was that of a skull. Working with plants took me naturally into working in gardens, and I began a series of installations which I called Jardins Biologiques over the years, where I grew mostly vegetable plants in gardens, and I would bring in found objects, and I would bring in materials that I would find in recycling bins into the garden. The idea at some point was to create again this interface between all the plastic materials we produce and discard and how the effects of this on nature. So I captured vegetables, sometimes even apples and so on in these objects, or I transformed some of these plastic shells into pots and so on, such as computers and printers. I grew some of these plants in bottles and syringes, including. Here is an example of a zucchini that grew constrained in a plastic bottle, which I then liberated and then photographed and also transformed into a somewhat precious object. It is while working in some of these garden installations that one day I met a very interesting gentleman. Okay, just for a brief minute. Bonjour à vous, bonjour à moi. Yes, and merci Pierre for allowing me to have this really brief little information for you. I met Pierre a number of years ago when he was working in one of the gardens, and I understood his concern about all these beautiful vegetables that were trapped in plastic. Very, very sad situation. So I offered him my services as a plastic surgeon for vegetables to make some bearing surgery to release these beautiful vegetables. And these are now on video. You can watch all these wonderful surgeries on YouTube under Dr Legumes. Yes, and I'm going to show you here one of them in particular. Bonjour and hello to you and to me too. This is Dr. Legumes. Today we have an incredible amount of clients. I am going to be working late into the night, trying to save as many as I can. First, I am going to show you a very sad story of what happens if you do not operate fast enough. A container for ketchup and a tomato caught in it. It makes no sense where this world is coming to. Voilà, très belle. This family is now happily reunited, mother, father, uncle, and the twins. Grenado tomato. A very, very unique, très dangereuse situation. It will be history for me. Never mind the tomato. Voila, et voila. It's a wonderful surgery, a very unique, never seen before, une tomate grenade. Too many syringes around the world, and it cannot but be natural for tomatoes to fall into them. Very nice, a beautiful shot. Look at this happy family again. And isn't this beautiful? We cannot be happier than this. Unusual, a double family tragedy. Tête de la pilule. Again, I am getting so good it is not believable. This is two tomatoes in the same family. I've never seen a bunch of happier tomatoes. From moments ago, they were all in plastic, and I almost am crying right now. It's too beautiful I have no words to say at this point. And until then, be careful with your tomatoes. Yes, these are very difficult surgeries to do. But while I was working with them, I also became interested about how to explore different aspects of food. And I am personally very interested in cooking, and taste. And therefore, I started to also present some of my recipes about the taste, on how to make the taste of certain emotions. So, if you go to my Dr. Legumes, you will see different recipes on how to make things like humane ratatouille so that your vegetables don't suffer, but also things about the taste of things like absence or the feelings of acceptance. And more recently, and very important as we are living through this situation presently, the taste of resilience. And you can find those recipes on my YouTube channel. So I encourage you to go and indeed try them out. Okay, all right. I'm just I'll let Pierre come back. Thank you, Dr. Legumes. That was very, very interesting. Working in gardens drew me to become much more aware of the issues around soil fertility. And the fact that in many of our orchards, vineyards, and gardens, even home gardens, we diminish soil fertility by all the insecticides, the fungicides, the herbicides we use commonly. We destroy it by harming the earthworm population, which is critical to maintaining good soil fertility. This then led me to do a project in bioart, if you want, using again this biology and art together, and if possible, living organisms together, by involving earthworms directly. In this project, I create paintings and videos. The first step is for me to paint on a surface a pattern or a symbol that is in paint that is mixed with insecticide, fungicide, or fertilizer. After this, I take worms that are from my compost bin, and they are not harmed and during the video, and they go back to the compost bin after. But for the project, I put them bathe them into some dyes that are food safe, and then I put them on the paper, and they leave a pattern or a trace while they're on the surface. I videotape this process and then finish the project as a painting. It is interesting to note, as you can see in this video that I'm going to show you, that they definitely avoid the areas where there's insecticide, fungicide, or fertilizer. And that is the point of this project. I'm trying to get viewers the message to think twice about buying perfect fruits or perfect vegetables that are produced at the cost of soil fertility. My most recent series of paintings was inspired by a poem called Sink by Alisa Harmsweeb. This poem addresses the heavy footprint we have on our planet. And here is a series, therefore, of, again, these paintings using worms and different footprints. So in conclusion, as I mentioned, I like to use art as a way of sharing knowledge and making people think about the environment in a way that is sometimes surprising, sometimes humorous, somewhat not too didactic, that makes them feel or react a certain way. Here are some of my contact information, as well as the links to my videos that are all on my website at leitner.ca, as well as on my YouTube site for Dr. Legumes. So Thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. I hope it was somewhat enjoyable. And as Dr. Legumes likes to say, be good to yourself and to your food.